And welcome to Beerfield Fantasy Football Shots. I'm your host today at Hot BFF with two P's. It is Tuesday, December 12th, 2017. We're at the news and to talk waiver wire for the upcoming week 15. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at HopBFF, HOPPBFF. You can follow the show at BeerfieldFF, and you can follow the other host individually at Nick Sparts and at ThurryBFF. Also, you can find the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, the Beerfield Fantasy Football Podcast. We release Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, and YouTube content here 7 days a week. Let's get into the news. Starting with players that have gone to injured reserve today, ending their seasons. Josh McCown with a broken hand. Bryce Petty will replace him. Bad news for all Jets receivers there. Carson Wentz is also headed to IR. They're in better shape with Nick Foles, who actually projects as a streamer to back in QB1 this week. Also making the trip to IR, you've got Byron Marshall, Ryan Shazier, and Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed hadn't played in the last 4 weeks. Vernon Davis will finish out the season. Byron Marshall had been backing up Samaje Perine. I'm assuming they'll sign somebody. The only thing that they have behind him is something called the LaShawn Andrews, I believe, or behind Perine. So we'll see how that goes. And then Shazier is just official with the spinal stabilization surgery. Patriots are finalizing a deal to sign former Browns wide receiver Kenny Britt. This is unlikely to be relevant for anything that has to do with fantasy football this year. He could take off in the playoffs, play for a contract track next year. So some dynasty relevance there, but not really anything to do this year. So don't run out and grab him or anything. Falcons running back Tevin Coleman did not practice Tuesday. He is in the concussion protocol. Slight bump to Freeman if he does not go. Steelers cornerback Joe Hayden is returning to practice this week after a broken leg. So he should match up with Cooks, and their defense got a lot worse when Hayden got hurt. So this is good news for the Steelers defense. The Chiefs have lifted the suspension to cornerback Marcus Peters. Not that this really matters too much to them. That defense is all out of sorts. Redskins safety Su'a Cravens has received clearance to resume all football activities after dealing with post-concussion syndrome at the beginning of the season. He's looking forward to playing in 2018, so for you IDP players that may still have him, Su'a Cravens will be back. Speaking of people returning, Robert Woods is on track to return against Seattle this week. It's not what you would consider a plus matchup, but considering the Jaguars and Blake Bortles just torched the Seahawks, this is good. Woods was, I think, the wide receiver 3 before he went down, so definitely an interesting play. If he's on waivers, go get him. If you own him, start him. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reports that Aaron Rodgers is 50-50 to play this week. His collarbone needs to be 80% healed to take the field, and it's really unknown at this point if Green Bay is going to let him play and risk re-injury to that collarbone if it's not all the way 100% healed. It wasn't expected to be. They do still have a slim chance to make the playoffs, so they may run him out there, but at this point it's still unclear whether he will play or not. Stay tuned. We will have updates every day. And finally, the greatest return man to ever play the game, the Windy City Flyer, Devin Hester, has decided to call it a career. He notched 20 total non-offensive touchdowns in his career, including 14 punt returns. He played long-time Chicago Bear, also spent some time with the Falcons, where he actually broke the all-time record, and the Seahawks last season. He was pretty sure that was it, but it was officially announced today. So, Devin Hester, you were ridiculous. And onto the waiver wire. So waivers, just some guys to look at and potentially pick up this week. If your waivers don't run until Wednesday, hopefully you get a chance to see this before you have to have those claims in. Quarterback Blake Bortles, he just torched Seattle. He had a good week before. He's got Houston and San Francisco left on the schedule, so he's got some cushy playoff matchups. You do still have Fournette there, but he is throwing the ball about 30 times a game. Hasn't turned the ball over as of late, so Blake Bortles, if you need a quarterback start, just lost Wentz, something like that. Aaron Rodgers, as we just mentioned, he's 50-50 to play, but if he's out there, worth the flyer to pick him up. You got Nick Foles, who for his career is typically safe with the football. He's, if you look back at 2013, he did have some multiple touchdown games. He's not going to burn anybody with a bunch of yardage, but in this offense, I think that he could be pretty efficient. You got Jimmy Garoppolo, who's got Tennessee this week. After that, he's got Jacksonville, so it's going to be a 1 week fill-in if you get Jimmy G. But if you need him this week, could be good. And you've got Joe Flacco, who's had 2 strong weeks. At running back, Peyton Barber, who it remains to be seen if Doug Martin's going to stay on the bench or not. So he's an intriguing pickup. Might not be necessarily the safest start, though. Kerwin Williams, if Adrian Peterson does not go, he's going to be the back for Arizona. You've got Rod Smith, less optimistic about him. He does only get about 10 touches a game. He just did a lot with them. And Wayne Gallman, who does not have a great matchup this week against the Eagles, but he did outsnap Darkwa. Remains to be seen if that was due to Darkwa's injury or they want to see what they have in Gallman. But at this point, it makes sense for them to see what they have in Gallman. At wide receiver, Jordy Nelson, if he got dropped, this is contingent on Rodgers coming back, if you're going to start him or not. But, if he comes back, you want Nelson. He may have been dropped due to lack of performance. D.D. Westbrook has improved for 3 straight weeks. Corey Coleman finally showed that he could do it, even though Josh Gordon's there. Tyrell Williams had a blow-up week, but he's been pretty inconsistent, so I would kind of shy away from that if you can. Amari Cooper did hurt himself again on Sunday, so Cordero Patterson is his fill-in. And then Mike Wallace for the Ravens also had a good, actually, I think it's now 4 of the last 5 of his weeks have been relatively solid. At tight end, Eric Ebron put up his first good game all season, so if you wanted to take a fly on that. O.J. Howard continues to outsnap and outwork Cameron Brate. And then Trey Burton, only if Zach Ertz is still hurt. He should clear the concussion protocol, but it has not officially yet. And for defenses, if they're out there, if you can get them, you got the Vikings against the Bengals, the Broncos at the Colts, Saints against the Jets, Eagles against the Giants. The Falcons are playing Falcons are playing Tampa Bay. That's all I got for you today. Be sure to check in tomorrow. I believe Dan will be here with your starts and sits. We'll also have a podcast dropping tomorrow, so please check that out. As always, follow us on Twitter at BeerfieldFF. You can follow me at HotBFF. This has been Beerfield Fantasy Football Shots, presented by Beerfield Fantasy Football. I'm going to say Beerfield Fantasy Football again, just so I can say Beerfield Fantasy Football. See ya.